In this video, I'll show you the basics of Node in just 40 minutes. I cover many things such as how asynchronous code works in Node, how to create a server and listen and respond to requests, what is NPM and how to use it, and how modules work in Node. Like and subscribe, and let's get to it. The first thing you should do if you are brand new is to go to the Node.js website right here and download Node. So for Windows you can just download and install, and if you are using another system you go to other downloads and help yourself, or probably this page will be for your system. And also, if you're on Windows, I highly recommend going to this git-scm.com website. So this is the git bash, and installing it, which will allow you to basically use the Linux shell on Windows, okay? Instead of using something like the PowerShell or the command prompt. Okay, so make sure to get this, and to make sure you have all of these, here I am in a folder which I'll use for this video. I'm gonna right click and I have git bash here. Okay, so if you see all this, so far so good. Now to check Node, I'm gonna say node space -v for version. So this is my version. And with Node comes npm, which I'll cover in a bit. So npm space .v, a dash that is not space, but again npm comes with Node. So hopefully you see all this, and now we can get to the good stuff. I'm gonna be using Visual Studio Code as my editor. So here I am in the folder which I'll be using for this video, and I have git bash open here with the folder inside of this folder, that is, you can see the location right here. So I can just say code space and dot, okay, and that's gonna open it in VS Code. There we go. And in here I am going to create a new folder, call it start, and a new file index.js, okay. And if you don't see this here at this panel, Control J. Okay, so Control J, and I'm gonna go to the terminal here, and I get PowerShell by default, but I want to use git bash. So I'm gonna go here to this arrow and choose git bash. Okay, and I'm gonna also click here to get rid of the PowerShell. I don't want it. Okay, good. So now the first thing is to actually get into the start folder. So right here I'm gonna say cd, and if I just type s and tab, it's gonna tell me what I can use. So start, enter, and there we go. Okay, and now here in index, if I say for example const name is equal to John, let's say, Shift Alt F to format that, and then if I console log that name, I can actually run this script via Node here. Okay, so I can say here Node, and I tab, and again it's gonna give me what I can use, and there we go, I get John. Okay, and I get this here because the global name variable in a browser has special meaning, but it's fine here, it's not a problem. So let's move on. What I want to say is that Node is single-threaded, okay? Which means that there is basically one thread for however many users there are. Whereas, for example, let's say in PHP, basically each user gets their own thread, okay? So if Node would use synchronous blocking code, it wouldn't work with many users, because everyone would have to wait for something to finish in order to move on. So let's see an example of that. I'm going to create a text file in here, call it input text, and just say some text here. And I'm actually going to comment this out with Control//, and I'm going to require a module. So I'm going to say const fs is equal to Let's see if I can get some help, and I can't, I guess. So require fs. Okay. Shift Alt F to format. And this fs is a core module, so it just comes with Node. Okay. And it stands for file system. Let me also put a comment here, synchronous blocking code. And next, let's say const, and let's say text input, and fs read file sync. So read file synchronously is the method of fs. And in here, I'm gonna say // because I'm in the same folder, input text, and I need to specify here encoding, so UTF-8. Okay. And after that, let's see, I'll console log that text input. So let's see actually if this works. Here in the terminal, I'm gonna say clear, enter to clear everything, and again node and index. Now I have two, so I have to actually write it, index.js, and we get here some text here. Okay, so it's reading from the text file, and after that, let's write to a file. So I'm gonna say const txt output, and here I'm gonna say backticks, and today's date is and date now, like so. And then I'm gonna say fs write file sync and specify the location. So I'm gonna create a file called output.txt and just pass the variable. That should hopefully work. We'll see. Shift Alt F to format. And let's console log at the end written to file. Okay. Shift Alt F to format everything, and let's clear this and node index.js again. And we get here some text here and written to file, and we get output here, and today's date is, and timestamp basically. So it all works, but the problem is it's synchronous or blocking code. Okay, so imagine if this file took a long time to read. You would have to wait for that in order to see this, and then if this took a long time to write, you would have to wait for that before you see this. And on top of that, imagine if you had, these things usually happen fast with computers, but some things take longer than others. And also imagine if you had thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of users. So this just isn't acceptable. It's not realistic, okay? And Node is single-threaded, so what is the solution? And the solution with Node is to use callbacks, which means that the code will be non-blocking, okay? So for example, while this is happening, the code will actually move on. So this will be working in the background, and the other stuff is just going to move on. So it's not going to wait to move on. Okay, that's the point. So let's write this asynchronously. Let me actually put a comment here first so we know what's happening. So async non-blocking code. Okay. So for that, I'm going to say fs and read files. So again, just a method of the fs module. And by the way, I'm going to cover modules in detail, so just follow along for now. I'll cover them in a bit. And now this method actually accepts a callback. Okay, so it's an asynchronous method. So to actually read a file, I'm going to say again just /input text and pass the encoding. But now I'll also pass a callback. So that's the difference. I'm going to say error for error and data. Fat arrow here, so an arrow function. Okay, and here I'm gonna just log data. Okay, so the point here is that Node will start reading this file in the background, this file right here, and it will actually move on. Okay, and this line here will run only once this file has been completely read. Okay, so let's add some more code. Just console log, for example. So log, whoops, and let's say here second console log. Shift Alt F to format everything. So let's run this now and see what happens. Node index.js. Okay, so we get some text here written to file. That's from this right here. But then you see that we get the second console log here, and then some text here. Okay, which is coming obviously from this input text. So you can see asynchronicity in action. So you can see it is non-blocking. So this works fine, but the problem is that you can end up with what's called callback hell, where you have too many callbacks inside of other callbacks. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create two new files here, file1 txt and file2 txt. So this is file 2 and this is file 1, and let me just move them like so. Okay, and let me copy this code, and we can also check for errors. So let's say the file doesn't exist. Okay, so I can say here, for example, if error, and then I want to return with the console log saying something went wrong, let's say. Shift Alt F to format. Okay, so if I now change this name to, let's say, input2, which doesn't exist, and run node index.js, and the up arrow is for the previous command here, and we can see here something went wrong. Okay, let me also just comment out these so we don't see them anymore. Clear this. So now inside of this callback right here, I can read that file1 text. So again, let me actually just copy paste this. Shift Alt F to format this a bit, and I have 2 spaces, but I prefer actually to have 4. Okay, and I'm gonna actually call this data2, so console log data2 here, and I'm not gonna use this error checking because it's just cluttering up space, I believe. Let me also have this as input2, and this will be file2. And now let me copy this again and now paste that code inside of this callback right here now. Okay, so this will be file3 and data3 and console log data3, and let's also write to a file, so inside of this callback. So say fs and write file, and the file will be called final.txt, pass the encoding as well, and before that actually we need to pass in the data to write. So backticks and data2 and new line and data3. Okay, and finally a callback here, so air fat arrow, shift alt F to format all this, and I'm just gonna call console log at the end, written to file. Okay, so these here will all be done in order. Okay, so first this, and then this, and then this, and then this, but in a non-blocking way. So let's run this and see what actually happens. Oh, I have file 2 and 3 here. Let me just change this to file 2 and this to file 3. Okay. And here's the final text file, but let me just clear this arrow up twice and just run this again. And there we go. Okay. So you can see that we get this some text here, which is this line right here, before we get all of these here, which actually come after it, because everything here is non-blocking or asynchronous. And our final txt has the correct text in it, so it's all good. The only thing that's not good is that you can end up in callback hell. So here where I have a few nested callbacks, it's not a big deal really, but imagine if you had like 10 or 20 of these. Okay, so the solution to that problem is to use promises and async await keywords, which I'm not going to cover now, but that's the better way to write asynchronous JavaScript. But the point here is that Node uses callbacks for asynchronicity. Okay. And the final thing I want to mention here is that just because you are using callbacks doesn't mean that your code is asynchronous. Okay? Whether a callback is synchronous or asynchronous depends on the function that calls it. So if the function is asynchronous, like this read file, for example, or write file, then the callback is asynchronous too. Okay? Let's now cover how to create a server with Node. So I just created a new folder here called server with index.js. Okay, let me just cd into it like so. So for that, I'm going to say const http is going to be equal to require http. So this is just another core module of Node. Okay, so you just have it if you have Node. And then I'm going to say http create server. And let me just use this. So recres, this is request and result. And fat arrow, but I don't want function here then. And I'm going to say res end hello from the server. Okay, shift alt F to format this. So this end will output whatever we have here. And I'm going to assign this to a variable or a constant called server. And then I'm going to say server listen and specify a port. So let's say 3000. This can be any free port. And have a callback as well, where I'll log listening on port 3000. Okay. And you can specify the host here as well, but it's not necessary because localhost is the default. So let's run this and see if it actually even works. So node index.js, and we have here listening on port 3000. And if I go to localhost 3000, there it is. Okay. And if actually we go to any URL, we get the same response. So let's say ABC, we still get the same thing. And this is a very basic application. So for anything that's not really super basic, you would probably use Express, which is a framework for Node. And I'm gonna have a few videos out soon on how to create REST APIs using Express, and probably MySQL one video and MongoDB the other video. But yeah, this works in its most basic form. So if I use this rec here as well, not just res, I can log console log rec and URL. Okay, and I need to restart now, so Control C to get out. And instead of just using node index again, I'm gonna use nodemon, okay, which will auto restart when I make a change to the file. So if you don't have it, install it by saying nodemon I, which is short for install. So install or I and -g to just install it globally. Okay, so I'm gonna say nodemon index.js. And let's see if I refresh this now. You can see here the requests, the request URL, so /abc, and this favicon is always requested. And if I go to the root, basically, I just get the / here as the request. Okay, and let's go to customers /customers, that is, and there we go, /customers. Okay. Now with this rec URL, we can actually add some basic routing if we want, some routing logic. So let me actually have this in a variable. Call it path name, let's say, or whatever you like. Okay. And now here I can say if path name is / or the root, or path name is /customers. In that case, I'm gonna resend customers list. Okay, and I'm missing another equal sign there. Okay, else if path name is /customers /ID. Okay, so let's pretend this is an actual ID, not a string ID. And let me just copy paste that. So this would be customer details. Else, so if it's neither, actually none of these, so we have 3 here. If it's none of them, then I'm gonna say res and let's say 404 not found. Shift Alt F to format everything, and if you don't know this HTTP status codes, just Google them. So 200, for example, is okay, 404 is not found, and so on. Okay, so let's see what happens. My server auto restarted here, so if you're not using nodemon, and you need to save it as well, and for me it saves when it loses focus. So if you're not using nodemon, then just Control C out of it if you need to, and node index again, but again I'm gonna use nodemon. And let's see what happens. So /customers is where I am, and I have a bit red is not defined. A bit of a problem here. Okay, this is supposed to be res. Save that, it restarts. So /customers, and we get here customers list. Okay, great. And if we go to the root, again we get customers list. And if we go to customers /ID, customer details. Okay, and if we go to /abc or whatever doesn't exist, 404 not found. Okay, great. In case of not found here, we can actually send the response header and not just write 404, because this is just a string, it doesn't mean anything. Okay, so I'm gonna say res and write head. Okay, and here I'll specify the status code, so 404. And let's see, and let me right click and inspect. So now if I refresh and go to console, you can see here I get 404 not found. And actually, let me just show you the difference. So comment that out, say restart, refresh, now I don't see it. Okay, and also I see it here, but also if I go to network, here it is. I can see clearly here what's happening. Okay, so this is the request, this is the status code, the type, and so on. Okay, And furthermore, I can specify the content type. So instead of this, I can, let's say, have h1 here, which will actually display as h1, even though we're not specifying the content type, but we can add the content type here, and we should, to the write head method. Okay, so I'm gonna say here content dash type and text HTML, like so. Okay, which is supposed to be, of course, in an object. So let me just have it like so, and Shift Alt F to format. So now if I refresh, I get the same thing here, but if I click here, I can see the content type as well, okay, which actually wasn't there before we specified it. Okay, that's gonna be it for the server part. I'll cover npm now, and if you know what npm does and so on, you can just skip this video, npm init and so on. I mean this part of the video, that is. The next part is the best part and is the modules in Node and how they work. But anyway, for npm, I just created a folder here. Let me just cd actually into it. Oh, I'm in server, so cd and 2 dots to go one level up, and now cd npm. Okay, clear here to clear everything. So npm, you get it with Node, and if you just run npm-v, you have it. And it is the place where from which we get all the modules. Okay, so basically what we do when we start a new Node project, we run npm init. So npm init, and now here we get asked some questions. I'm just gonna say enter for these. Entry point index.js is fine, and it's all good. You can of course specify this if you want. I just want the defaults. And now I get this package.json file. Okay, so here you can see we have the name, description, and so on, and scripts that we can run as well. But also here is where our dependencies are listed. So if I install a dependency or a package that I need for this project, so let's say express, I'm going to say npm I express. Okay, and now first of all I get this node modules folder, which is where all the npm packages are installed. And also I get this dependencies here, call block, and you can see express because I just installed it. Okay, so that's basically how it works. And you install this dependency like any other we've seen so far. So let me just copy the name and create the index.js file. So that would be const express or whatever, and require express is how you'd use it, include it and use it. Okay, and that's basically it, not much to it. Let's now understand how modules work in Node.js. So Node uses CommonJS, okay, the CommonJS module system, and not the current standard ES modules import-export. So required that we've seen, and exports and module exports is CommonJS. So what actually happens when we require a module, as we saw for example here, right here? Well, what happens is first that the path is resolved. So Node is going to look for a core module first of all, such as HTTP or the FS one we also used. Then it's going to look for a developer module if this one doesn't exist, which would be something like dot or 2 dots, let's say 2 dots and one folder up, so to, let's say for example, lib and controllers. So this would be or controller. So this would be a developer module, meaning one we created ourselves, and it would look for the controller.js file, but if it doesn't find it, it would then look for the index.js file inside of the controller folder. Okay, so this can be either a file or a folder. And finally, it would look for an npm module. So something like this. So it would look in the node modules. So again, it looks for the core module, then the developer module, then the npm module. Okay. After that, the module is wrapped in a function. So to see that, I am going to log here require module, which you don't usually do, but just to show you wrapper. Okay, so inside of this wrapper is the module. So and I'm here in the modules folder in the JS file, which I created actually before the video. And now if I node index this, you can see I get this function. And here we have exports require module, file name, and dir name. So this is exactly where require comes from. Okay. After that, the code is executed, and then the exports of the required module are returned. And finally, after being loaded for the first time, the modules are cached. Okay. And this means that even if you require the same module multiple times, you will get the same result. So the code in the module is executed only in the first call. And for any subsequent calls, the result would simply be returned from the cache. Okay? And I'll show you how all this works in practice right now. So in the Node.js module system, each file actually is treated as a module. And to prove that, I am going to get rid of this, and let me just clear everything here. So I have an empty file here, this index1. Let me close the others. And if I just console log here arguments without any other code whatsoever and run that, you can see I do actually get something. And the arguments are from the wrapper function, right? That I just showed you. So here's the exports object, which is empty now, the require function, and so on. This is the module and the file name and the dir name. Okay. So again, each JS file is treated as a separate module. Let's see now how to import and export data between modules. Okay, so here I'm gonna get rid of this, and I'm actually gonna create a new file in here called module1.js. Okay, and here I'll have a class called calculator, let's say, and just a few methods. So add a b, return a plus b, and let me select it, Shift Alt down to duplicate this twice. So subtract and multiply. So this is a minus b and a times b. Okay, great. So we have that module, and now in index I want to include it. But before that, of course, I need to actually export it. So I'm going to say down here, module exports equals calculator is fine. Okay. So we use module exports when exporting a single value. We can also export multiple values, but right now we're just exporting this class, so it's basically a single value. Okay. And now finally to include it, I'm going to say const and calculator, I guess, or we can call it anything. And I'm going to use require as usual because we are using common.js. So that's going to be module1. And again, we don't need the JS extension as usual. So now I can say here const calc1, for example, and that's gonna be equal to new calculator, like so. Okay, and then I can console log, let's say, calc1 and add, for example, 2 and 3. So now here, clear this, and let me just run nodemon, actually, just so I don't need to restart each time, and I get 5 right here. Okay, so that works. We have just exported our module from here and included it in here in the index.js file. But we can also shorten this basically, meaning we don't need to use this line. So I'm just going to comment it out, control/, and here I'm not going to have a name actually. So just a class, and I'm going to say module exports is equal to this class. Okay, so this is basically the same thing, just less code. And you can see this refreshed automatically, and I still get 5, so it's all good, no errors. Let's also see how to export multiple values. So to do that, I am going to create a new file called module2. Okay, and here I'm going to say exports and add. So these are going to be just properties of this exports object. So this can be called anything basically. And now I'm going to say a, b, and use an arrow function now because they can. And a plus b. Okay. Shift all down. And this is going to be subtract and a minus b. Shift alt F just to format this. And now to include this in index.js, I am going to, let me copy this line, and I'll call this calc2, and it will require module 2. So let me just console log it first of all, why not, so we see what we actually get. So calc2, and here it is. Okay, so we get the add function and the subtract function as well in this object. Okay, and of course now I can, let me comment this out actually. I can say here calc2 add 1 and 2 and calc2 subtract 5 and 2, and let's see what happens, and we get 3 and 3, which is correct. Also, since we're getting back an object here, we can use destructuring. So I can say, for example, const, and then here say add and subtract, so these have to match what we have in the exports object, and this will require module 2 again, like so. And now I can just say log, not that log, but this one, add, let's say 6 and 1, and also subtract 6 and 1. Okay, so let's see what happens, and we have a bit of a problem, and that's because I'm not using ./ here. Okay, so we get 7 and 5, which is correct. Okay, and also we don't have to import everything. Just because we have add and subtract doesn't mean we have to import it. So I can just subtract, import add, not subtract, comment that out, and it's fine. Okay. And finally, let me show you caching so that we see in action how modules are cached. I'm going to create a new file, module3.js. Okay. And here, first of all, I will log, let's just say module 3, so we know where we are. And then I'm going to say module exports. That's going to be equal to no arguments, and just another console log. Say login from module. Okay, Shift Alt F to format everything. And now in index.js, let's see, Down here I am going to require the module three times, but I also want to invoke it immediately. Okay, Shift Alt F to format this, and let's see what actually happens. And here's the result. So we get module 3 just once. Okay, let's just check out the module again. That's this line right here. So we just get that once, even though we require the module 3 times. Okay, so you can see that it has indeed been cached. Okay, that's gonna be it for this video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.